What was your most Akward date? We met up at a local burger joint, and he didn't say a single word. I asked questions, and he responded with head nods, and occasionally a chuckle that's more like a release of air. I was pretty sure he hated me, so I told him I was just going to go home. That's when he finally spoke. He asked me why and told me to please stay. So I did, and then he continued to sit in silence. Looking back, now I realize he was just nervous, but man, at the time I really thought that I must have been horrible to be around. Update: we've been together for 2 years, and he actually talks to me now. I went out with a guy I met from OkCupid. He complained about how tall I was literally within the first minute, and for the hour the date lasted felt it necessary to criticize basically every facet of my being, from the color of my skirt. Do you think black makes you look thinner or something? Though I was average weight to my favorites TV shows, I can't believe anyone likes that shit. I ended up ditching him in the middle. IMO. He was either on the rebound but looking for things to find wrong with me, or some woman hater looking for ammunition, or maybe a one-nighter if my self-esteem turned out to be bad enough. At any rate, that was the end of that. Sounds like he was trying to neg you or something. Also, tall women are awesome. No idea why he complained about that. In 9th grade, a girl I liked asked me to go to Disneyland with her. Her father worked there, so she got us free tickets, which was sweet, but a couple of days before we were meant to go, she told me she didn't like me and that she understood if I didn't want to go to Disney with her anymore. Since I had never been to Disney before, I told her I still wanted to go. The day comes around, and we go to Disney. She surprises me by telling me her sister and her sister's friend are coming. The car ride, there was the three of them gossiping while I sat there awkwardly. Once we got to Disneyland, she made no effort to make conversation with me, or keep any conversation that I made with her going. She didn't want to go on any rides, so we just walked around until we met up with her sister again, and then she just talked to them. This made the whole day very awkward, and as a result, I had no fun. He took me to Arby's. Whatever was in the middle of the day, and I'm chill. He didn't pay for me, which isn't expected at all, just it ended up being awkward because the cashier commented on it. He then began to ask really odd questions like if I liked fat guys. He was heavy, but I mean I don't have a fetish or anything, so what to say, and asked if I thought he should lose weight, etc. He also wore the cringiest outfit of a t-shirt with a WoW reference over top of a collar shirt with cargo shorts and a fedora. I wish I was kidding. Then halfway through our meal, he grabbed my hands and said, "Lavahex, I love you," and I noped the fuck out. Oddly enough, he found me a while back on a dating site and said a lot had changed and asked for a second chance. I didn't respond. I was 15 and very awkward and shy. A fellow 15-year-old, who was also very awkward and shy, asked me to be his date to this fireman's banquet thing to honor his father. I had no idea what to wear and ended up being incredibly underdressed. I also did not know the guy very well, and we really didn't have anything to talk about. I didn't know anyone at this banquet except for him, so even more awkward. After many hours of silence and awkward comments from his family/friends about our date, it eventually came to an end. His brother dropped the both of us off at my front door while he circled the block to give us some privacy. As my date was saying goodbye and leaning in for the inevitable goodnight kiss, my mom opens the front door and asks why we're just standing there. The one time I've been thankful for her nosiness. We never really spoke again afterwards. He just wouldn't stop talking. Maybe he was amazingly nervous, but it was literally a non-stop loop of him talking. And that wouldn't have been so bad, but we went to see a movie after we grabbed a bite to eat, and even during the film, he kept murmuring to me throughout the whole thing. Imagine 4 or so hours with someone who's just talking at you with nary a pause. After a while, it just turns into a droning noise because I couldn't really interact with him in any way. I was exhausted at the end of it, and really glad I had driven myself to meet up versus having him pick me up at home. It didn't help that any time he or I would touch, hands brushing, walking around, and accidentally bump into another, he would cringe visibly and move away. Like, why did he even ask me out? The world may never know. I declined his request for a second date. I got a great one. Started chatting with a girl on Facebook that I had worked with a few years prior, and eventually she invited me out for drinks. About 10 minutes into the date, she leans in and tells me she's still bleeding from her abortion. In a panic, I ask if she needs me to take her to the hospital or call somebody or something, to which she calmly replies, "No, it's okay. This happens every time." I, F/6'2", went on a date with a guy, 5 feet 1 inch, and he already had a girlfriend, but she left him and went to Italy. They still had an apartment together, so he assumed they were still together despite her dating other dudes in Europe. But he was trying to move on, so he liked me. I didn't know that until halfway through. We went to get Orange Julius. It was disgusting. Then he wanted to see a movie, and so we saw My Awkward Sexual Adventure. We thought it would be funny given our situation. It was not funny. It was awkward. And I had the fake taste of Orange Julius in my mouth the entire time while his tiny hands tried to hold my Truckosaurus once. Edit. Words. I met a cute woman while out and about, and we hit it off. I asked if she was single. She said yes. I asked her out on a date a few days later. She showed up with her boyfriend. I was stunned. I didn't even know what to say. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, looked at it, and said, "Oh man, work emergency. I have to go. I'm very sorry." I never saw her again. I invited another woman out on a date. She was a friend of my friend. We went to a nice wine bar. She started flirting with the bartender in front of me. I was taken aback, of course. I put down enough cash to pay for my drink, told her something like, "This isn't how dates work," and walked out. She asked if I was going to pay for her drink, and I laughed and told her the bartender could if he wanted to, but I sure wasn't going to. Never saw her again, and told my friend to never set met up again. Luckily, the next date was with my now wife, and that was much better. Mine is not really a date, but you'll see where I'm going with this. A good female friend of mine asked me to prom as just friends, and I didn't have any other prom to go to. We're both homeschooled, so I said yes. So I went out and got the tux and everything, and I almost got a corsage, but in the end decided not to. And thank God, I didn't. It starts at 6, so she says she's riding with a group of friends, and they'll be there about 5:45. I get there 5:35 and wait, and then at 5:58, she finally shows up. With her date, let's just say it was very awkward all around. Went to a football game in high school that my friend's sister set me up on. The girl had a weird name when we were introduced, and I figured I'd find it out later instead of having the awkward what? 5 times, besides who says a person's name when they talk damn right. Well, a buddy of mine ended up being there too, and saw me in the stands. He ran up with that shitty smile like he caught me on a secret date and asked, "Who's this?" in front of her. My mind went into OHSHIT mode, and my first reaction was to use the loudness around us to fake a similar sounding mash of letters to what I heard earlier. He just continued saying, "What?" About 8, Felicia, Fallishia, Fashish. Felicia's later her face went into her hand and she said, "Felicia, Felicia." We were silent the rest of the time. We've all been there, but for future reference, the trick is to reverse the introduction. Turn to the girl and say, "Hey, this is my buddy Rudiger." Then hopefully she says, "Hi, I'm Felicia." Let's see. It was the second date. I met her on Tinder. I had her over to my place. We smoked and put on a movie. She spent some of the time clearly messaging other people on Tinder. Then she fell asleep on my bed. She picked the movie, it sucked, and I watched the whole damn thing. She woke up, didn't apologize, we kissed, she left. Tried another date. We spent the day hanging out with her friends, and everything seemed fine. Later we went back to my place. She picked another movie. She fell asleep again. She woke up, and I jokingly gave her a hard time about it, seeing as this was the second time she'd done that. And she told me, "You don't know me very well," in an annoyed tone, and left. The next day I asked her if she was okay, seeing as she woke up last night in an obvious bad mood. And so I was wondering if something had bothered her about last night. She told me she didn't want to see me anymore and that she wasn't ready for this, and then blocked my number so I couldn't respond. Swell girl. August 10th. Would take her out to a nap anytime. If you've ever seen Arrested Development, picture an egg. I think she said about a dozen syllables throughout the entirety of the meal. She just kind of sat there looking around and not really responding to anything I said. Brought her back to her dorm afterwards, then went back to mine. No second date. Went on a group date with a boy who acted opposite my best friend in a play. It wasn't really a group date, more like I tagged along with her group of friends from the play and him. Her friends were really nice to me, but he was sick and petrified of the group judging him. So he said next to nothing. One of the members of that group even joked about it, saying, "Is this the most awkward date you've ever been on?" And I had to awkwardly stammer out something as inoffensive as possible. I've been with that same boy for almost 2 years now. Didn't go so bad after all. Went on a date with somebody off of Match. My profile clearly said I'm not religious. We're both late 40s. I asked her what her kids were up to. She said violin practice and then Bible study. When I told her I wasn't religious, she said she would pray for me to find salvation. She asked me what my kids were doing, so I paused and told her the truth. They're doing shots of tequila on my back porch. Dinner ended quickly, and I ran through the house to get a shot. Met a girl on a plane who was moving to my city. We chatted the whole way back, tried to exchange contact info, but failed, but later found each other on Craigslist misconnections. Very cute. We meet up for a drink, conversation is flowing, we're hitting it off again. We get a second round, and I mentioned something about how I've recently signed up for a dating site, but I prefer meeting people in real life. She says, "Wait, is this a date?" Well, kind of. Yes. She gets furious, throws some money at me, and storms out of the bar cursing me. Years ago, I went out to dinner with a guy I'd met online. He seemed pretty normal, but during the entire hour-long meal, He didn't say a single word besides yes or no. Nothing. Any question I asked got a one-word answer, and he didn't ask me a single thing about myself. It was so bad that I caught the woman at the next table giving me pitying looks. She wanted to meet for lunch. I planned to take her for a nice lunch, but she insisted on McDonald's. She ate the cheeseburger in such a disgusting way, I nearly heaved. I DK what it was about her or the way she bit into it, but it combined with the limited appeal of a McDonald's burger made me sick. I didn't finish my own lunch, which was a delicious gyro from another place in the food court we ended up in, and ended up wasting $20 on what was arguably the worst meal and date I've ever sat through. She was also way less attractive in person than in her pictures, go figure, and her personality was way different. Turns out she was very self-defaming and kept insulting herself, and I couldn't be with someone like that. Was just glad I didn't take her out for that $100 lunch I'd meant to impress her with. Met a guy online years ago, and after meeting up for coffee, we decided to go to dinner. Guy was okay, definitely not my type, but I figured I'd see where it went. We go to the Cheesecake Factory, which is a 45-minute drive from me. We're eating, it's super awkward because I'm the only one trying to make conversation. We finish, the bill comes, he looks at me and says, I don't have any money. Going into it, I honestly expected to split the bill. So I'm kind of peeved at this point, but whatever. I pay, we say goodbye and go our separate ways. As I'm walking to my car, I realized my meter was going to run out soon, so I basically start jogging. Get around the corner of the street my car was parked on, and there was a cop writing me a ticket. TLDR, was tricked into paying for a dude's meal on the second date, and I got a parking ticket. He took me to an Italian restaurant and engaged the waiter in an eternity of clueless wine talk before ordering a bottle, at which point he was carded and busted for using a fake ID. I was 23, and the guy insisted that I should still drink while he had Diet Coke. All the tables were super close together on the floor, and the couple at the next table laughed at him and kept toasting him with their wine glasses. I felt sorry for him until later when he surprise groped me in the parking lot, and when I didn't want to kiss him, he asked if I was a lesbian. I said, yes, I am. And he drove me home without saying another word, but every once in a while randomly chuckling evilly to himself. I went on my first and last online date with this guy, who seemed normal. Emphasis on seemed. We had dinner at a nice place, but at the bar, which was crowded, and about 15 minutes into our first date, he said I had a nice, but asked me my thoughts on anal sex loudly, and everyone turned to look at me. It was horrifying. Within the first 20 minutes of the date, she told me that she didn't believe that healthcare should be publicly funded after I told her that my job was in ensuring public funding of healthcare, but did believe in unicorns because they're real in your mind. There was not a second date. There was not a second half of that date. For me, it had to be the time I went on a date with a woman. I'm totally gay. I talked to this guy on Grindr. He seemed nice, very cute. We decided to meet up for dinner and a movie. Everything went super well, and we had a drink afterwards. I mentioned that I was doing something the next day with my friend. I mentioned her by name. He almost instantly became distant and left. Turns out he was in the process of transitioning from a she. I have no problem with my transgender brothers and sisters, but he was in the midst of the transition. I was not trying to be shallow, but the downstairs plumbing is kind of a make or break for me, so it wasn't a good match. Why did he get distant at the mention of my friend? Well, before he was a lesbian that dated my friend for many years. Last I heard, he is doing great and transitioning nicely, but man, was that awkward. Edit, pronouns. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.